All right, everyone, my name is James Szeszycki. I do something a little different today. Instead of talking about applications of thermodynamics, I'm going to actually talk about the start of thermodynamics. So this is Szeszycki Carnot. He's the father of thermodynamics. And let's get started. Let's see. All right, so a quick outline. We're going to talk about his early life. Then we're going to talk about his main work for thermodynamics, which is the reflections on the motive power of fire. And then we're going to discuss his legacy that he has left. Okay, so he came from this stacked family of just amazing people. His full name is Nicholas Leonard Szeszycki Carnot. Szeszycki is the name of a Persian poet that his father gave him. That's what he was known by. And so his father was Lazare Carnot, who was a mathematician, military engineer, and an important leader in the French Revolutionary Army. He served with Napoleon in his army. And his brother was Hippolyte Carnot, a statesman who served in Napoleon's government. Hippolyte's son was Marie-François Szeszycki Carnot, and he was the president of France from 1887 to 1894. So at 16 years old, he went to the school École Polytechnique in Paris, and this school was designed to train military engineers for service. He went to class with the likes of Gaspard Gustave Coriolis and was taught by professors such as André-Marie Ampère, Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac, and Simeon Denis Poisson. If you look at those names, those are, they did some important things. They're pretty smart people, right? So you can see this was a pretty prestigious school. And then, so when he graduated in 1814, he spent some time in his service. He became an officer as the French Army's Corps of Engineers. And around this time, 1815, this is known as, in this time period in France took place called the 100 Days. This was when Napoleon came back from exile, and for it was like 115 days where he fought battles against, I think, against other surrounding European countries. And then at the end of that 100 days, Napoleon was finally defeated, I believe, at the Battle of Waterloo, and power was restored to the Bourbon monarchy. So after this time in 1815, when Napoleon was rejected from power, his father, who served in Napoleon's army, was also exiled. And so Carnot's position in the military as an engineer became shaky. He did a lot of, he was posted to many locations, expected many fortifications, wrote many reports, but his recommendations for improvements were being ignored and rejected because of his father's position. So his career was stagnating, and in 1819 he transferred to general staff in Paris, and he was on call. He received like 2/3 of his original pay. It was at this time where he began to work on some topics that he was really interested in, which eventually led to his works of the reflections of the motive power of fire. So at this time, everyone was using steam engines. They were used in a lot of industrial applications. There was even a crude internal combustion engine that was being developed. But there was no sort of development for the scientific theory of these engines. The conservation of energy was barely even understood at this time. So Carnot wanted to find answers to these two questions. Is the work available from the heat source potentially unbounded? And can heat engines in principle be improved by replacing the steam with some other working fluids or gas? So in this book, Reflections on the Motive Power of Fire, he sought to answer those questions, and his book was a very general, broad overview of heat engines, right? So when he went into his discussions on heat engines, he used very simple algebraic calculations. He really didn't go into a lot of calculus except for some footnotes. But his most important work that we all know about today was in an abstract in the back of his book, where he described an idealized heat engine, where you put heat in from a hot source into the engine, work is outputted, and then the rest of the heat goes to a colder source. That is the idealized heat engine, the Carnot cycle that we all have studied and learned today. You can go look up his actual, derivations for it. It's pretty interesting how he gets there, but it's a lot to talk about, so I won't cover that. But basically, Carnot only lived to be about 36 years old, and his book received very little attention during his life. So it wasn't until about maybe like 4 years later after his death where his work was really the impact of his work became apparent when Emile Clapeyron and Clausius and Kelvin further looked at his work and eventually led to develop the concept of entropy and the second law. It basically all stemmed from Carnot. So, it wasn't to the end of the 19th century where Carnot's ideas were fully put into practice. Anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
How did he die?
Cholera. Yeah, in like an asylum, so not good. Not good.
It's terrible.
Yeah. All right. Yes.
What was he in the asylum?
I guess cholera does that to you. Yeah. I think apparently there was ravings at the end of his life. So the question was, well, his question was how did he die? Cholera. His question was why was he in an asylum? Also cholera.
Missing a beat.
Too much science.